Joining me now is news.com.au Entertainment Reporter Bronte Coy and News Corp columnist Angela Mollard. Ladies, welcome. Bronte, you saw all this unfold over there in the UK. What were the highlights?
Oh, when it comes to pomp and pageantry, no one does it quite like the UK. It was spectacular, and exactly as you said, and with the pictures at the top of the show there, it was just a glorious display of that soft diplomacy. The royal family were absolutely on form. It's really hard to pick a favourite moment, but I've got to say, whenever Princess of Wales steps out among them, she just is fantastic at what she does. She's so engaging. We also are never quite sure if she's going to be taking part in everything. For example, this week we weren't sure if she'd be in at the state banquet, and then of course she turned up, and it was the first time we'd seen her in a tiara for about 18 months. So for me, that was a highlight. I also really enjoyed the speeches between the French President and King Charles, who clearly have a very warm relationship. It was a very tactile visit. You could tell that they were very much enjoying spending time together. But also, and more importantly, this was all with the backdrop of Windsor. And of course, this hasn't happened a lot over the years, because it usually state visits would be at Buckingham Palace, but that's undergoing these extensive refurbishments. So this was all moved to Windsor. And honestly, it just was the most beautiful setting for it, especially with that iconic quadrangle there, and of course St George's Hall for the state banquet, that 50-metre long table, absolutely spectacular.
It was made for a state visit, and I personally am very glad that there was the location. Angela, a visit like this has so many layers, and obviously we love the royal spectacle part of it, but the geopolitical imperatives obviously just as important. What do you think that this visit was intended to achieve, and do you think it achieved that?
Oh, enormously. I think there was a 100% success rate in that, because beyond the pomp and pageantry, this was a powerful diplomatic gesture. As you said, it is soft power because it's not an invitation from the Prime Minister. It was from the palace themselves. And of course, this is the first visit by a European state leader since Brexit. So it has enormous significance, particularly at the moment when there are massive issues around migration, around Ukraine, around dwindling American interest in supporting other areas of the world. Having this relationship between France and England, which in the past has been called cordial. King Charles updated that to say that it was an amicable relationship now. Very, very important for Europe to be seen to be united and secure, with as many issues, defence matters, of course, as well, going around on the outskirts. As you know, it's so important that they are a united force, geographically and geopolitically.
Now, Bronte, on to some other sort of diplomacy, and fresh reports that the King and Harry's top aides have held a secret summit. Do we know any of the details?
Yeah, this is very interesting. Of course, we've talked so much about whether a reconciliation will be possible over the many years this rift has been going on. But there are actually now photos of Prince Harry's new Chief Communications Officer, who is US-based, meeting with the King's Chief Communications Secretary and also one of the Sussex's UK-based PR officers. So these three met together. The word on the street over here is it was a very casual drink setting. It was at a private members club, just a stone's throw from Clarence House, which is, of course, the King's London residence. And the three of them got together, and as I said, it was a casual drink, so it doesn't appear that there was a formal agenda. But the very fact that this meeting took place is very interesting, because it is that first real concrete step toward some sort of reconciliation term being met. And it also comes just weeks after Harry openly said in that BBC interview that he really wants to reconcile, that his father isn't speaking to him. And that sent shockwaves around the palace, because there was some quite personal details, including the fact that Harry said he didn't know how long his father had left. But at the same time, perhaps it served as that impetus for them to all get together, get in the same room and start saying, how are we going to end this for good? So that was very interesting. It's also been reported that Harry's Chief Communications Secretary, who was at that meeting, then flew back to the US immediately and reported to Harry, obviously just to let him know the tone of how it all went down. But definitely watch this space, because there it is. You know, it's very clear that the conversations are at least happening, and maybe this will all set the scene for 2 years down the road when the Invictus Games is on.
Yeah, and I'll get to Invictus in a sec. But Angela, just on that meeting itself, anything more you'd like to add there?
Oh, look, I think it's intriguing, as Bronte has said, because those players, Tobin Andre, who is the communications secretary for the King Charles and Camilla, he was a former Mail on Sunday executive. I worked for him for the period. Now, the fact that this has been seen, there's photographs of these people meeting, it speaks volumes about how they wanted to see it. I can't believe that it was leaked to the Mail on Sunday. wouldn't go so far as saying that, but there is someone there that wants to drive home the message that they are now looking at talking. Now, as an opinion writer, I wrote a piece 2 Sundays ago as it was revealed in the UK that King Charles's funeral plans were being updated, which gives the suggestion that he is now living with cancer rather than likely to be cured from it. I wrote a very strong piece saying that they have to reconcile, that you cannot leave the situation as it is. And I think that would be very much in the minds of Charles and Camilla as they deal with the King's illness and as they think forward as to what legacy they leave between William and Harry, because there is no hope of William and Harry becoming brotherly again unless the King reforms that relationship with his son. So very interesting that we saw pictures of that.
Yeah, and still with you, Angela, and Bronte mentioned it just a second ago. Further comments this week about the royal family being very welcome at the Invictus Games next year. Obviously, it is in the UK. Is this all part of this attempt to all head in the same direction?
I think this is obviously being leaked. It's not until 2027, these Invictus Games, so they're getting in 2 years ahead. And what what Harry's team is saying is that that the royals are all invited to the Invictus Games, and it's super important for him that he does have members of the royal family there. The last time there was an Invictus Games event in London, members of Diana, the late Diana's family, were there, but there was not a show from the royal family. I think this is part of that drive to think about what we're going to do looking forward. And of course, the King's diary is booked out months, years in advance. So I think it's very strategic in terms of getting in there early.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, Bronte, over to Montecito, and Meghan's rosé has dropped. The feedback has been thick and fast. What have we heard?
Well, like all things that Meghan puts out there, you know, they've divided the crowd. So this rosé was first teased a couple of weeks back. It's finally dropped. As expected, it's sold out because everything that she's put up on As Ever so far has sold out quite quickly. This sold out within the hour. Again, we don't know how much stock was released, so it's hard to comment on what that means for demand. But again, you know, Meghan fans, as we always see with things, as I said, that she puts out, Meghan's most ardent supporters are saying it's wonderful. A lot of people have reviewed it as bland. I think it's interesting she released a rosé at all, given that, you know, her former lifestyle blog was named after a red wine, which is her favourite drink. I would have thought perhaps she'd move into that space. But she has spruiked this wine as saying that it is infused, this is a quote, infused with whimsy and joy. I'm not sure that everyone that's reviewed it has come back with that same conclusion. As I said, there has been some feedback that it's bland, but at the same time, once again, it's sold out. So who knows? At a $45 Australian dollar price point, you would expect it to be of high quality. It was made, I think, around 6 hours away from where she and Harry live, at a winery called Fair Winds Estate, which caters to a lot of celebrities. So look, you would expect a high standard for that price and for where it was coming from, but I wouldn't say that it's been overwhelmingly positive in the feedback so far.
I do like the description of it, though. That did make me giggle, I do have to say. Angela, Zara and Mike Tindall were spotted in Australia at the last State of Origin match. Well, that was a nice surprise, wasn't it?
Oh, I loved seeing this. This is completely surprised because they usually don't come here in winter. They come in summer, of course, for the Magic Millions Carnival. But this shows, I mean, of course, Mike is a former rugby player and he has a podcast on sport. But what I love about this, it shows their enduring affection for Australia. Of course, they met in Manly in Sydney when Tindall himself was playing in the Rugby World Cup. But there's a lot of talk about them setting up a second home here. When I interviewed Chris Hemsworth's wife last year, she talked about their really close relationship, all those Magic Millions ambassadors that'd been to each other's houses, that the Tindall kids absolutely loved hanging out in Byron Bay, that they loved the bearded dragon that the Hemsworths had, and that how when they got back to London they had to try and get this pet for one of the kids. So I think the likelihood of them spending more time here, if not indeed having a second home here, is entirely possible. And I'm all for it because they are my favourite royals.
And what a great way to make yourself relatable to ordinary people, and particularly ordinary Australians, by turning up to the state of origin. Thank you so much, Angela Mollard and Bronte Coy.